long, skinny paper, you're always going to be squeezing your models vertically, which really takes the movement away. So what I'm going to be doing is working always with wide paper. Another reason I use wide paper is so that I can actually work models side by side by side throughout the whole process. Sorry about this wire. Okay. You know what's going to happen, guys, is that I'm going to do a whole bunch more webinars on this probably throughout the week, and I'll have a lot of these kinks worked out by then. Angie? So what I have is, I'm using art supplies. One thing I was telling you in the beginning, the things that we need to like, that have to interact with each other are that our art supplies are not like pencils. What I mean by that is we want to use art supplies that are really non-specific. So one thing you can use, what I mean is things that don't have sharp tips. Okay, things that are loose and soft and inexact, because most of us grew up with pencils at school, and we grew up with coloring books, and all of that involves a lot of really thin, perfect black lines. And I don't know about you, but most of my life, you know, you hand me one of these and one of these, and I get very nervous because I feel like everything has to be perfect because of the skinny black line. So we're going to use something loose and soft because it will take you away from the concept of line and get you into the sense of shape. I mean, something I would even recommend for anyone who's starting with model drawing is to allow yourself to grab a piece of clay. I don't care if it's Play-Doh or what, and allow yourself to try to build bodies with clay as well, because using something three-dimensional is going to change the way you think about drawing, because the way we're going to work on drawing here is going to be about drawing as if we were sculpting, so that we're really feeling like we have a three-dimensional form. So for example, I don't know if you saw that model pose that I was working with was here. Okay, and it would be really nice if you could see both at once, but if I angle my camera like this, you're going to get a distorted foreshortened sketch, and I want you to get it straight on. So rather than looking at what I'm looking at, you're just going to get my narration and feel out how this drawing gets built. So here's some things to think about. Allow yourself to feel the whole page before you work, and that you don't need to use the tippy tip to the bottom. You know, allow yourself to give some little margin there. And notice I'm drawing lightly, and I'm like super lightly. Drawing lightly may be a brand new concept to you, because like I said, so many of us grow up with A, B, C, right? And all these really sharp, crisp, unforgiving things going on. So what we're going to be doing today is play with this concept of softly building. Now, what I just did, I didn't explain any of it. Let me know if you have any questions so far. There's actually a lot going on here. One is that I've kind of defined the top and bottom of my figure. Another thing I'm going to be considering now is a pure vertical line in the center, not to scare you into order, but that a pure vertical is a reference tool that we can use for everything. If you ever see artists, right, where they're like holding a pencil in front of their drawing and doing this thing, is that pure vertical becomes a reference point, and everything happens in relation to that line. So you could literally hold your pencil up in front of the model and notice how, sorry for that noise, how different parts of her relate to that pure vertical. For example, people often draw legs as if they are purely vertical. And when we hold, I'm trying to get that glare away for you guys, it's not helping too much, but you can see how her legs are diagonal, right? And because you're far away, you can't see so well, but as I get closer, there's a lot of relationships I can gauge using a pure vertical, one of which is the plumb line. So the plumb line relates where her head is to where her inner ankle is on the foot that she's resting on. So you could literally start your drawing with a head and a foot, which is kind of a silly concept, but not so silly. Because remember, one of the first things where you're going to work on here with me is creating some drawings that aren't about the finished product yet. They're not about the finished product. They're about making a study. They're about relating your eye to your hand, to your heart, to your mind, and getting this relationships all coming together. It's also what I call warming up, what I call warming up, what everyone calls warming up. Okay, so another thing I'm getting used to is how big would her head be on this size of paper in relation to her whole body. So what I'll do is I'm going to show you a great reference that you can use when you're model drawing yourself, your own body, or any body, okay? Which is, you can use your pencil or you can use your fingers, but you're going to gauge like how long is the top of head to crotch compared to crotch to toe. If she has heels, it's equal for this model. Some people, you'll know this, you're going to start paying more and more attention as you look around people on the street. You know, some people do have more leg than upper body. Some people do have more upper body and less leg. And then once you put the heels on, you start adding like half of a head's length. In fact, yeah, half of a head's length for her is what's getting added by the high heels. So that's also something to notice. Right. And I notice also that my model is directly over my paper. So you don't want to ever try to be drawing like this. I don't even know why people do this. I think it's because some people draw right on an angle. You never want to draw your model like this and then have your, one of the best tips I ever got from a model drawing teacher was that when you look down and when you look up, you should see the same thing. Down, up, down, up. See the same thing. And I believe really, really deeply in that. It's true. And so this way, the pure vertical on my paper, which is parallel to the edge of the paper, is also the pure vertical when I look at her. Now, the next thing I want to share with you is I kind of did this thing, and I did it without even looking at my model. So if you look at your model pose, and in the previous video, I'll edit these together, but I talked about these model drawing videos. I'll link one to the sales page for the webinar special, which I'm going to share with you a little bit later. But these are in the Model Magic course. And what happens is you get all these different poses with time and with music, and you'll get to sketch from them. Yeah. So what I'm doing now is, because I know top of head to crotch equals crotch to ankle, I can gauge that with my fingers. And that's going to give me that point where the upper body and lower body end. And what you're going to see is something I like to do a lot is have this interbalance of, like, if I set up enough structure, then I also have more freedom to feel like crazy, free, and expressive when I draw. So my secret here is to be working very, very lightly and setting up all this structure so that when it comes time to capture that body, I have enough support to get loose and quote unquote, you know, crazy or whatever. So some things to think about when you select photos is you don't want to get a photo that is too much hair. Actually, this is a little tricky because it does mess up with her shoulders. We can't see them as well. Now I drew kind of an S curve, and an S curve is something, it's also known as the arabesque. S curve always is happening when a model is standing with her weight shifted to the left or the right. A lot of things happen when a model stands with her weight shifted. One thing is you start to get more flow and more movement than if she's just standing straight. The movement is much more static and subtle when they're standing that way. But another thing is that when I'm looking at this pose, and I would like to bring you in closer for that. Let's see if I can. Yeah, okay. When I'm looking at this pose, I'm going to pay attention to me. Where do I feel an S? Now, there's no right or wrong to this, guys. The most important thing when you're looking for the S curve in a pose is that you see it or feel it. So literally, sometimes I'll feel the S curve one way and the other way. Okay, this flow. So there's never a right or a wrong answer. The only thing that has to be right is that you actually feel it. So even though I had drawn this one, I'm actually going to switch it because I feel like this hip is out more than this hip. And so this is going to be my S. If you begin with this one flowing line, notice I'm drawing with my hand, with my arm, I mean, not my fingers. So there's a flow of energy going up and down the page. If I start this way, it's almost impossible that I'll end up with a straight, stiff, cold, controlled figure that looks like disjointed, because a lot of times people will draw like a lot of little pieces down the page to build their figure. When we start this way, it's like her body already starts to exist. You see that? Okay. And so then we can start building on this. We know that the crotch was around this level. I'm using this crayon and I'm not using it as a tip. I'm literally using the side of it, and I'm going to start building this body. Now, here's another tip I wanted to share with you today when we do this. Well, there's a few. Okay, there's so many. It's so many when it's like a random lesson out of nowhere. One is to practice sketching circles just with your hand. They can be big, they could be small, they could also be long or whatever. Okay. All right. So we're going to use these to build her body, because these to me are three-dimensional. They're like spheres. So I can really, once I have my S curve, I can use them to build her body. So like that first thigh that I'm looking at here, which is much easier for you to see if you do this. So when you choose photos, remember what I said, it's good if the hair isn't covering. It's good if the clothes are not covering everything yet in the beginning. And it's good if the shadows give definition that help you see things as well, because shadows become shapes too, and that could be super useful. So knees are usually about halfway down the legs. I can build my knee even as a little sphere, and my calf as a long ellipse. Now this is already getting pretty dark. I would have liked to keep it kind of light. I'm noticing her hips, the relationship of one hip to the other, and it's like this. And that usually always happens. If she's resting on one foot, it pushes that other hip up. And then the hip on the other side relaxes because her knee is bent. And I say that like that's so easy to understand, but I know that that was hard for me to understand for a long time. So the fact is, there are so many new information when you're beginning that it's hard to, it can feel hard to bring it all together at once in the beginning. So allow yourself to only get one or two bits together at a time until, you know, the more you do it, the more comfortable you will get with it. I'm still working super light with always drawing with my arm. I'm just getting soft, fluid shapes. Now we're already done with her legs, actually. It's a good thing that we drew her foot and her head first, because here's what happens. It's a holistic, I'm so glad you're trying to draw along, Josh. That is exactly what I hope to hear. Yay! And I'm sorry that on this video, you know, the model looks so teeny tiny. But like I said, let me know if you need your sign up link for this course, because you already purchased it. Okay, I don't know if you got to dive into it. So, and now another thing I want to make really clear at this point is that sometimes you're gonna find that you need to redraw the head, redraw the leg. This is normal. This is normal that you will like correct, quote unquote, correct yourself as you go. Let me see how much of this I can fit on the screen at once. I just wanted to do less foreshortening of the page, so I moved maybe I shouldn't have. All of my tripods are no longer like very effective with the new iPhone. Okay, so now, so for example, if I start to feel like her head now needs to move over a little, I have that freedom. If I draw nice and light, then I can always get darker as I make corrections, quote unquote corrections. I say correction, but I don't want you to think that that has anything to do with, hang on, I'm trying to get it better, with a need for perfection, because that comes later. Last call here. I don't want to make you guys car sick, but I wanted to get an optimal Guess it's as good as it gets. Okay, so now for the upper body. Remember how I said I noticed that her hips took on this angle? What happens with the S curve is it's created by the opposite angles. If the hips are angling this way, she would literally tip over if her upper body was just going like that, right? She would like fall. So generally, if it's a standing pose, she's going to be looping back in the opposite direction on the upper body. So you can look at her shoulders, or it may be her breasts, or it may be the bottom of her rib cage that's taking the opposite angle. So literally, you see how the shoulders going this way, but the hips were going that way. And that's how we get from here to the opposite. It's very interesting. So on there, I can build the bust at whatever size I see. I keep it really light so that if I need to, I can move it. I look at the bust in relation to the shoulders, both size and location. Yes, this is a lot. And the thing is, the figure is so quote unquote complex, and what we do is we're breaking it down into a few things. It's thighs, knees, calves, feet. It's this plumb line and the S curve. The S curve will kind of create her core, like her spine, which is great too. And then you can build the arms. First, I will build them often as sticks, not because she needs to be skinny, but just so I can map them. How long, where are they? And once I feel like I've captured that, I can build them up with ellipses. I often use a lot something I call X-ray vision in my drawings, which is if something's in front of something or something's in back of something, sometimes I'll draw the whole thing. Like, oh, I don't know if that makes sense, but like, don't be afraid to draw things that are behind things that you can't see. Just, you're doing visual note taking here. Okay. And I feel like I wish I could like screenshot this. I don't know if I can. It's a little scary, but I'm going to try. Because that shows you where, whoops. That shows you what's going on here before I start adding to it. I probably should have got some more along the way, but I can take screenshots from the video replay later, so don't worry. Okay, so now I really ignored her hair to focus on her body. And first I want to ask if there's any like question about this part. There's a few different ways I could take this. And okay, here's a tool. I'm going to give you another tool. Remember I told you top of head to crotch equals crotch to ankle? Not because I say so, but because that's what I saw here. And as a general rule, that works. But there's other ways that you can use that tool. For example, you can gauge how wide are her shoulders and compare that to how wide are her hips on your paper, and then do it on the screen or on the model in front of you. And make sure that if they're the same, then you've got them the same. Or if the shoulders are wider than the hips, try to kind of gauge how much and create that much difference. If vice versa, if the shoulders are narrower than the hips, pay attention, try to see how much. And that's how you can gauge some of the widths of things. So I just told you how to compare the length of the upper body to the length of the lower body, right? But hey, what if we want to compare? Oh, and then I told you how to compare the width of the shoulders to the width of the hips. But guess what? There's a really beautiful secret in that, which is more powerful, which is when you compare how long something is as compared to how wide something is, because this is where you get your overall proportion. You take one width thing and compare it to one length. So when people say 8 heads model, let's say, they mean the length of the head is 8, right? And then they would say, you know, and then you could, that's interesting for length, but the widths can all be open-ended. When you work that way, you just do by eye. But if you want to get specific about width, you could see, how long is her head compared to the width of her shoulders? And that's not something I tell you, that's something your eye tells you when you're looking at the model. Okay, so I usually find shoulders are like 1.5 heads. This one's a little more. It's fine because it depends on the person. You know this. Some people have smaller heads or bigger heads or narrower shoulders or whatever. So another way you can do it is, this is my favorite. Um, so much I want to tell you that I know it's too much. Sorry, guys. All right. My favorite one relates to this paper I'm using. Remember I told you to use really wide paper so that you're never restraining your pose, right? Remember we had that talk? Well, what I like to tell you now related to that is, whenever you have a pose, pay attention to the widest part of the entire pose. What do I mean by that? I mean, like, if she has her elbows, like elbow to fingertip, here would be the maximum width of this pose. It's like the two widest points. How far apart are they? Okay. And then once you've determined that, I mean, let's say she had one leg sticking out here. I might go from, like, you know what I mean, the leg that's out to the elbow that's out. Whatever the maximum width of that pose is, capture that and then compare that to the length. 1, 2, and oh wow, I got like 2.25. So I can compare that here and see if I'm on track. If it's 1, 2.25. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, this was like 2.33. Now hang on, I got a question. I drew the body before the head, and now it seems hard to place the head. Oh, totally. In fact, when I drew for one thing, I think it's really cool that you drew the body before the head. And secondly, it's okay because, like I said, sometimes I'll draw the head 3 times before I get the placement. But like, if you feel good about the feet and stuff, I would go pure vertical up. Give yourself a guideline, and then look at your model. And maybe it's because you can't see are you using this model? Hang on, let me make sure. She's charging, but the battery keeps going down even though it's charging, which I don't know what to say about that. So let me give you this for just a minute so you can do a little catch up if you want. And hopefully we won't lose our model before it's all said and done. And pay attention to, like, is that head over the inner ankle? It's actually over both inner ankles, which is interesting, even though I feel like her weight is definitely more on this leg. Okay. And then, and so you might draw the head very lightly. And once you've drawn it, then you will truly have something to react to. And you will truly be like, oh, okay. Now, I used these are oil pastels. Another thing I was thinking of using today was this woodless chunk of graphite. It's also something I use for this exercise. The thing that graphite does better is smudging, but I want to remind you that when you smudge your figure, only inside, not outside, to me, she becomes very fluid. She becomes much more human and real to me, personally. Now, I may just be like totally cuckoo pants, but you got to do whatever really works for you. So to me, now she really looks more alive and vital to me. And what's also really important to me is that she becomes separate from the paper. She has no dry white left in her, so she becomes literally distinct from the paper. So I think that's something you should allow yourself to do. How are you feeling with your head placement? Let me know. You may find you draw it a little bit over here, and then you go, and then you draw it a little bit over here, and then you go, step away, walk back, zoom back in. And then I want to show you something else about this process. Josh says, it seems floating, but it could just be me too worried. It's true. And guess what else? Even though it doesn't matter that you draw all the time, you are going to need to warm up too. I mean, even I needed to warm up and I didn't. So you know, that also leads to the insecurity, and mine's floating too. So one thing might be that you want to bring the head, make it a little longer, or, you know, define her neck, define the width and length of it. Just remember that the shoulders join the neck, you know, in that very like coat hangery fashion. So you usually get these diagonal muscles from the shoulder up to the neck. People usually don't get that at first, but you've been at this for a while. So I want to share another favorite secret while we're here, which is I don't know how comfortable you are with shading. So here's the thing, my fashion students always avoid shading like it's a plague. And this terrible thing about that is it's the one thing that makes the biggest difference. Your shading gives dimension. I mean, even here, I didn't shade. I just ended up with variations in opacity, opaque to sheer. And look how that became like 3D feeling. Do you feel it? Right? So this is a huge important thing to pay attention to. So when you shade, when you vary your tones from light to dark, you get dimension, you get form. When you do lines that are light and dark, these contrasts also give you form and dimension. They actually create dimension because the dark is always going to feel deeper and the light is always going to feel forward. So you get space when you do that. So the thing is, there's two ways to study shading, and one is, you know, great, you get pictures like this, great pictures like this, where you can literally see strong lighting. And that's a great way to build your vocabulary. The big secret with that is to let lines be lines and shadows be shapes. So yes, there's a line in her elbow crease here. There's a line under her arm. But there's also like a big shape. Her whole upper arm here is dark. Her whole knee is dark. Yeah, there's a dark line inside her leg, but there's also a shape that is dark. So when you add these shadow shapes, it's going to add a lot of dynamic to your drawing. Now, you can observe from observation, yes. And my iPad, even though it's been charging forever and ever, is now dead. So I'm going to just go ahead. That answers the question I was asking myself, which was, should we do it this way or that way? Now I got my answer. It's great to observe shadows, and I totally recommend for everybody, look at a model. If you have a model, make sure you use strong lighting from one side so shadows are enhanced and exaggerated. And or if you're choosing pictures to draw from, make sure that they are also with good shading. But there's a great way to fake it. And it's another one of my favorite exercises. This one's in Model Magic, actually, which is, okay, it's incredible to me how these exercises change the way you feel, the way you perceive, the way you see, the way you analyze. So drawing isn't just hands. Drawing is about how your brain is kind of trained. So this amazing exercise is that, okay, this is not opaque, right? The only part that's opaque right now is her neck. I'm going to only go opaque. Notice I used a dark colored crayon. I didn't use the orange. I didn't use the pink. It's really great to use black, brown, what's the other one? Oh, the blue. I really recommend this exercise with dark colors because you'll get a range from very light to very dark. Whereas if you work with a light color, you don't get a range. You know what I'm saying? The maximum range is going to give you more effect. So here's the thing. You're going to study space. things that are behind, you're going to get opaque. Okay. I don't have my girl in front of me anymore, but I have my pose in front of me, so I can do that. I know that this upper arm is more behind and that the other part of the arm is more forward. I know that this leg is bent. If this leg is bent, the knee is really in the front, and then like this part down here is farther away and more opaque, right? You see what's happening there? It's like off the charts. To me, it is. I don't know how you feel. Okay, let's come to the bust. Like, I don't have a model here now with shadows to help me. Nope, I don't. But I know that the bust is here, and I know that this area under her bust is farther away, especially with the fuller bust. I'm going to get opaque there. Do you see? Like, that's so powerful. And the fact is, this isn't even shading. This is not shading. This is observing space in my mind. So I have the neck is behind the chin, right? And if I was going to do it, and I didn't capture her hair shape, but like, I can't remember if this upper arm is back or forward, but I know that her bust is in front of her arm. So I can get a little darker there. And this leg is not bent, right? So maybe like the side of the leg, because her leg curves backward in space, I can make the side darker. Now here's the thing, guys. Another thing is that if you don't shade, you see how as I'm shading her, she keeps looking skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. This is an interesting lesson in perception. Okay. As who was once a flat girl, first she was white paper with lines, and she was wide and flat. And when I say wide, that's no kind of a judgment word. I'm just saying she was wider than this visually, even though it was the same drawing. It looked wider and flatter. Then I smudged it, and she started to look more. She already became kind of narrower looking because the whole thing became darker. Dark shrinks, right? Then we started adding shadows to the things that are behind. Those areas that become darker shrink again. And when I add shadow onto any tone, whether it's clothes or skin, she's getting skinnier again. So your perception isn't just size, it's influenced by tone. You don't need to like know all this shit, but I want to keep the awareness there, because when you have these awarenesses, you'll realize, oh my gosh, if you start drawing emaciated figures from the get-go and then you try to shade something, she's going to look really, really shocking at the end. And if you're sketching plus size, you really, really need to be as wide as possible. And then because when you shade it, she's going to keep shrinking and shrinking. So those are all, I'm going to add some tone to her hair. Okay, so, and really to me, this is not a line drawing. You know, the only lines I really have are these ones I put on the edge of her hair. But my goal was to create her as a solid form. Oh, and here's an interesting one. She was wearing high heels. So her toes were like closer to me. And then all of this was farther away from me. You know what I mean? So when I do this, I don't do a ton of gradations. The main thought is what's in front is light and what's further back is dark. And I just play with the relationships of what's closer to me and what's farther than me. And that's like amazing, because then, hi, sweetie, I'm sorry that the noise was distracting me because I get okay. We're going to be done pretty soon, but I started a little later. My daughter's like in quiet mode. So, things we just to review some of the things we went through with today was I used an oil pastel. This brand is called Artist Loft, which is like the brand name from the local Michael's store. There's also a theme of brand called Portfolio that I like because it's very slippery and it's water soluble, which can be a lot of fun because that means it turns into paint when you wet it. This one doesn't turn into paint because it's water resistant. So you always want to pay attention if you're getting oil pastel, by definition should be water resistant anyway, but there are oil pastels out there that are water soluble. I'm confusing myself talking about this. Okay, and I'm going to do a quick review of this with a different art supply, but one I'm going to talk about is there's graphite. And just to show you, this brand is called Lyra Graphite Creed by Lyra. Okay, let me show you the name there. There you go. I got this at Blick, and it comes, this is a 9B. 9B is super soft because B means softness. I don't know why, but so that means it's very smudgy. It also means that it gets very dark and very light. I want you to have that kind of range of expression. If you have a very hard pencil that doesn't go from light to dark, then you don't have a range to deal with. Okay, another way you might do this exercise is maybe with a brush tip marker. Just remember that the way you want to use it is drawing with your arm. I'm going to link a video. Where should I put it? My drawing circles video. It's Drawing Without Fear. You can find it on YouTube. I might link it up to the sales page for Model Magic, which I have up. I'm sending this replay out after, it's going to take some editing because of all the trouble I had at the beginning. But on this page, fashionillustrationtribe.com/webinar special, for 24 hours, I'm having Model Magic at a discount with a payment plan. I'm also offering Model Magic with a coaching package. So you get lifetime access to the course, but you get 3 months of sessions with me one-on-one by video call, which can be super helpful because model drawing is so deep and it could be something really great to work with personally. But I just want to let you guys know that this is it says fashionillustrationtribe.com/webinar special, and that's going to have the links to the things that are available for the 24 hours after I issue the replay. It's already up there, but I didn't put the link to the Drawing Without Fear video, which is free, up there yet. So you could use the same technique, but with a brush marker. You see how the point is that you want your lines, you want to have no ability to make skinny lines. I want you to be able to be working more like you're working with clay than you're working with a pencil. I want you to feel like you're working with clay. I want you to feel like you're working with forms, not lines. Let's see, I'm creating her like as I go. And whether this is for fashion illustration or whether this is for pure pleasure. Now here's the thing, if I just sketch this girl and I want to change this into, let's say, plus size, let's just do this for a minute. Okay, we all have similar skeletons. The lengths won't change if she's plus size. What will change is widths. So I could literally add onto this skeleton and build a larger, it's up to you where you want to add it. It might be a client you're working with. It may be yourself. It always helps if it's a body you know of or care about, right? Because that's the point. If it's pregnant or if it has a fuller belly, you can fill that in as a roundness, just like the bust is a roundness, the shoulders are roundnesses, and even the limbs in their essence, they're round everywhere, right? There's cylinders and cylinders and cylinders. Everything here is round from front to back. Another great exercise is to keep swirling through, feeling out the roundness, because it generates energy, and you can give yourself the challenge of drawing without stopping moving. It's a great exercise. This is what the Model Magic course is all about. So I don't think you've been in it yet, Josh. Is that New ways to use your art supplies, busting myths about A, how art happens, and A, how what figures and bodies look. And then C, things like this energetic exercise. What if you didn't stop moving until the drawing was done? What?
You said AAC.
Oh, did I? A. That's me. A, B, C. Oh, wait, what sounds awesome? The exercise, the not stopping, because I share, I always, everything I share is something that's blown my mind. The not stop moving, yes. And here's the thing, Josh. If you're doing the not stop moving exercise, okay, there's so many levels to this. I'll just put a few more in before okay, is that your energy builds. It literally brings vital energy to your drawings. I mean, how many people are drawing like, you know, everything's separate, everything's disjointed. So if you're doing the not stop drawing exercise, which is in the course, but we talk about now, one point is don't stop moving. The other point is don't lift your pencil up. They're kind of connected. So you have this continuous string of energy. And I love to relate that to music because I always say, if I sit down with a band or sit in with a band that I'm going to sing, we don't stop in the middle of the song because something was a little bit off. I mean, it would have to be really bad for us to do that. The song begins and the song ends. And from the beginning to the ending, there's no stopping. Like, how awesome is that? There's no stopping. There you go. It's an incredible experience, right? So, what? My dad wants to sharpen my pencils. Are there any in there? Thanks, Angie. There's a sharpener here too. Okay, so don't lift your pencil. Don't stop moving. And the final tip that I love about that exercise is that, because I remember asking my teacher specifically, I was really blessed with some good teachers, is that what if you know, you can't think that fast? What if you don't know what to do next? Well, then you hover. So let's say I know her bust is here and I don't know what to do next. I can just stay here for a minute until I'm ready to keep moving. Oof, you know? So that's a technique you can use while you're doing that exercise. If you don't know what to do next, find a safe place to hover. And I want you to think of building the figures from the inside out, from the core out. The biggest, most common perception that I'd like to, you know, myth I'd like to bust is the concept of like drawing from the outside in. Now we do that too. We have whole exercises where we isolate only looking at the outer edges, but without having a strong sense built into your brain of her core and building her from the inside out like she's clay. Working from the outside in, just working on lines from the outside becomes very flat or a little bit uninformed. I don't even want to, I can't even think of a word for it right now, but I really want to make sure that we do this work first. That's how I like, and then we graduate to line, because line is the thing that's been getting in our way for years. So if we can get away from line and then reacquaint ourselves with it, we'll be really well off. So model magic is, it's not in the core program, but we do some model drawing, right? But then people like you, Josh, who are in Freedom Fashion, get access to all the courses. You're in the subscription, right? So you get access to this course. And then I also recommend people to start with this course sometimes before they get into the fashion design and illustration course, because model magic really, to me, sets the tone. For me, that represents that whole first year of life drawing, model drawing. It's a very good foundation before going into the other stuff, if you have that luxury. Final thing, what I wanted to say is, remember how I was saying to hover someplace when you don't know what to do next? And I always repeat this quote by Ernest Hemingway.